We've all been there, right? Facing some challenge that feels, well, truly impossible. In this explainer, we're going to dive into an incredibly powerful story of transformation. It's a story based on a guide to rediscovering who you are after life just completely shatters you. It's a journey from the absolute depths of loss to a life filled with real meaning.
I mean, it's a terrifying question, isn't it? One that so many of us have to face at some point. All your plans, your sense of who you are, what your future holds. It all just feels like it's in a million pieces on the floor. And that's exactly where this story begins, right in that moment of total devastation.
But even when you're in that place of despair, there's this promise of resilience, this idea that no matter how rough things get, new growth is always possible, that a life really can prosper again. So this contrast, right, between being completely shattered and then thriving, that sets the stage for the entire journey we're about to explore.
Now, to really get a handle on the transformation, we first have to understand the sheer depth of the loss. The author of this guide, John Bianchina, his journey is just grounded in this relentless series of tragedies that honestly would test the very soul of any person.
And it started early. I mean, picture this. He's just 10 years old when his mom has to flee an abusive, alcoholic husband. The money was so tight that John and his siblings ended up in boarding schools, and he just felt completely abandoned. And you can imagine that feeling, it festered. It turned into this simmering anger that started bubbling up in his teens.
Then, bam. At 20 years old, life just deals another crushing blow. A motorcycle accident. It left him with a shattered leg, a broken shoulder, and a right arm that would be paralyzed permanently. And in just one instant, his entire active, independent life, it was just gone.
You'd think that would be enough, right? But years later, after he'd found love again and built this life for 15 years, that stability was just ripped away when his second wife died from cancer. The grief was, well, it was all-consuming. It pushed him into the state of just overwhelming despair.
And this is what brought him to his absolute lowest point. 2 attempts to end his own life. The first time, an overdose. And then just 6 months later, he intentionally drove his car into a wall. This isn't just hardship we're talking about. This is the absolute abyss of human suffering.
But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. It's often the only place you can really push off from. Every great story of resilience has a turning point, a moment where the free fall stops and that slow, hard climb back up begins. And for John, it wasn't some loud, dramatic movie moment. It was actually a really quiet, internal shift.
And this is the key. It's the simplicity of it. It wasn't some grand plan to fix his entire life all at once. Nope. It was just one choice. A single decision to improve one small thing. And that one little conscious act, that became the tiny seed that his whole transformation grew from.
So with that one decision, the real, practical work of rebuilding started. And what's so important here is that it wasn't about trying to get back the life he'd lost. It was about building a brand new one from the ground up, one piece at a time.
This contrast just captures that shift in his mindset perfectly. See, before the accident, he loved golf. The old story he kept telling himself was, well, my passion for golf is gone forever. But his new reality? It was all about adaptation. He didn't give up his passion, he just changed the rules. He actually taught himself to play with one arm. It wasn't just about external stuff either. He had to rebuild his inner world too. For years, he'd just shoved down his anger and grief. But now, he started to see his emotions differently. Not as these enemies he had to crush, but more like guides. He started to get that feelings like anger or sadness were really just pointing to the things that needed to be healed. Then there was this other huge realization. He couldn't do it alone. So he started to intentionally, consciously build and map out his support system. You know, friends, family, different communities. He made connection a practice, actively figuring out who he could lean on when he needed to. And finally, if you're gonna rebuild a house, you need a solid foundation, right? He rebuilt his life on a new one by figuring out a new set of core values for himself. Things like compassion, growth, authenticity. He basically created an internal compass. It gave his life a clear direction and helped him make choices that actually lined up with the person he was becoming.
Okay, so he's rebuilt himself. And this is where the story takes its most powerful turn. That personal journey of healing, of rebuilding, it started to morph into something way bigger. It became a mission to help other people.
This insight right here was a total game changer. I mean, think about it. For over 22 years, he had been carrying this massive weight of anger, regret, and self-blame. The second he realized it wasn't really about the world, but about his own inner turmoil, that's when he could finally take ownership, let it go, and forgive himself. And that led to the ultimate aha moment. He realized that everything he had survived, all the pain, the loss, the resilience, it wasn't a liability. It was a unique gift. His story could actually be a beacon of hope for others who were struggling. And that's what inspired him to create this guide in the first place. And this brings us right back around to the core message of his work, which really applies to every single one of us. It's all about taking ownership of our own stories, no matter what's in them. So his guide ultimately gives us 4 powerful invitations. First, to embrace your own story, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Second, redefine your purpose, but based on who you are right now, not who you were. Third, actively build those connections that will hold you up. And finally, and this one is so important, take a minute to actually celebrate your own incredible resilience. So we end on this question, and it really is the heart of the whole matter. Look, we can't always control what happens to us in life, but we absolutely can control the narrative, the story we create from it. Your experiences, your scars, your victories, all of it has shaped you. The real question is, what story are you going to choose to build from it all?